today we are talking about how to know if you have healthy boundaries in your relationships. And this can be relationships with a partner, relationships with family members, relationships with friends. Because I thought, for a long time, I didn't know what healthy boundaries were or healthy relationships or not. So I didn't realize that I did not have healthy boundaries and that it was affecting my relationships because you don't know what you don't know, right? So one of the things that I realized is that, and I heard a statement. I don't know if you guys have ever heard it, but it's being interested instead of interesting. Hello, Kimberly. Hi, Victoria. Great to have you guys here today. So I thought being interested instead of interesting, and I thought about that in terms of like dating or in a partnership type of situation. And I realized that in the past, if I was attracted to somebody, then when I would be around them, my goal was, to be a person that they would want to be around because I was attracted to them. I wasn't focused on if they were somebody I really, was a good fit for me. Like, I don't know if I just assumed, well, if I liked them, then that was a God thing. I kind of think that's what I was doing rather than really making an assessment. Be interested in them so I could see, are they really the person? And so, for instance, with my ex husband, he gave me all kinds of signs that he didn't have the same values that I. And I would, oh, you don't mean that. Oh, that's not really who you are. Like, yes, it was. And I missed it because I didn't have good, healthy boundaries, meaning, you know, enough respect for myself and appreciation of myself to be evaluating the other person. Are you the person that would fit for me? Hi, Jennifer. Great to see you too. And so, like, if you're in a situation like that, and here's the thing, if you decide they're not the right person, it doesn't make them a bad person or a wrong person. It's that you guys don't have enough in common, or you don't have enough of the same values, or, the things that matter. It's not about, and if they choose that, it's not a personal rejection. I thought it was a personal rejection for years, whether that was friendships or a partnership. We don't have really good, healthy boundaries for ourselves. We take other people's actions personally, and none of it is personal. Everybody's traveling their own journey and trying to figure things out. And along those same lines, I when I had, there was a friendship I had in particular, but many, I have, luckily, I've had some really good friends for years also. But I also attracted friends because I felt like if somebody needed me, that validated that I was a good person, that I had value. So I wasn't getting enough value from inside myself. And so I had a friendship that I had for years, and I realized in looking back that I just felt honored to be her friend, and it made me feel so good to be needed. And there was one point, which I've mentioned a little of that story before too, when I was going through cancer, and I called her, and the entire conversation was about, she was talking about all the things in her life, and then she got where she was going because I guess she was in the car, and she was like, "Oh, gotta go, bye." And that was a poignant moment. So it's not like you don't have moments like that in friendship, but if you have a friendship that over the years has, normal give and take, and the beauty of that, you just know that that person needed you to listen at that point in time. This was a moment that was so obvious that when I hung up the phone, I started thinking, and I realized that the relationship wasn't balanced at all. And don't get me wrong, it's not like she was wrong and I was right. I attracted that because at that point in time, I felt like I needed people to need me to feel like I had any value. I did not value myself without that. And in all honesty, healthy boundaries, you don't need people to validate you. Like, that you and God source energy, that's your validation of who you are. How do you set healthy boundaries? It is a journey because first you have to recognize it. Like, after I recognized that friendship wasn't a healthy friendship, It took me almost another year. And that's my point. Even as you start to realize it, and sometimes you'll realize your boundaries aren't good in certain relationships, but overall, it's because you haven't set them. And you may have picked somebody that really is a good person. And when you set the values, you set, boundaries, they listen. So then okay, this is, and maybe it takes more than one conversation, but if there's progress, then this is a relationship that most likely is going to be valuable in the long term. You just didn't realize that you needed to let them know that they hurt your feelings, or let them know, those sorts of things. And it's such a fine line between, because you want to not need other people to be a certain way for you to be okay. So you don't want them to have to act a certain way or be a certain way. You want your being okay to be within yourself. So you always have to evaluate, is this fair? Am I, but let's face it, if you work full time all day and they work full time all day and they have expectations that dinner is always your job, that's probably something that you're not going to be okay with in the long run, and you have to decide, how you're going to handle that. Setting healthy boundaries, first you have to recognize it. So my point was, there was so much that I didn't recognize for so long. And then I was married to someone who was never, ever, ever going to respect my boundaries or other people's boundaries. And you can have that happen. A lot of times it's when they themselves are in they don't, not only do they not have boundaries, but a lot of times if they don't and they won't respect yours, there's a little bit of a bully, or maybe a lot. And it's because they have a lot of pain, and from that, they feel like the only way to get power is to control other people, is meanness. And so you try to set boundaries and you can't. And it's a struggle. And then you just have to keep working at getting strong enough yourself that you're able to either, in that case, we went to marriage counseling, and it became clear that there was nothing going to change. And then that was when the only option was either stay and be miserable or leave. And God didn't intend for us to be miserable our whole life, and God, the universe, and you can't be who you're meant to be in that space. So in easier relationships, it's more of recognizing, and that's why I wanted to start with some ways that I had no idea that my boundaries weren't good. But if you're in a relationship where, when you hang up the conversation, you're exhausted, and it was mostly them talking and you listening, or in a relationship where a lot of times when you're talking to them, there's criticism towards you or criticism towards others, because that's a really, it doesn't feel good when you hang up the phone. And the point is that relationships that are healthy, you generally want to feel good, unless there's something terribly sad going on in somebody's life. But the majority of that relationship, the conversations are good, and you're talking about activities and things you're doing and things in each other's lives. You're not talking about other people. If the majority of your conversation is talking, i.e., gossiping, that's usually not good. And maybe both of you need some help with boundaries, in terms of, you don't want your life to be, you really want to operate from a space of being so good within yourself that there's not a need to spend any time talking negatively about others. So do you have any specific boundaries, Victoria? Like a more specific boundary that needs to be set, but you're not sure how to set it? Loving and flowing relationships. So the one thing we have to also understand is we can set our boundaries. We can't be responsible for how the other person responds. But what happens when we start setting healthy boundaries is, over time, we attract people that we can have that love and flow with. Sometimes you get to eventually have love and flow with someone you're having a difficulty setting boundaries with to begin with. Especially if it's a close, because say it's as an adult child, a parental relationship, or even as an adult older parent, a relationship with an adult child that maybe boundaries haven't been great and you need to set them. Those relationships in general, if they're in that space, both people had some boundary issues. So when you first trying to set boundaries, the other person isn't understanding boundaries. It's not going to be easy at first. They're not going to go, oh, sure, okay, got it, and then it's just going to flow. And so that's where you have to be prepared, because where we make a mistake, and I'm gonna tell you that, and it's still probably gonna happen, because we learn from doing it. But if I tell you, maybe it's in the back of your head to go, okay, now I see what she's saying. um, when you A lot of times in those types of relationships, because we love them and we want to have a good relationship with them, we're trying to convince them to let us have our boundaries. And those conversations are painful and difficult because we're defending ourselves. And you're never really lined up with yourself and God source energy when you're defending yourself. It is quite, Jennifer, you are right. It's quite difficult when it is a close family member. And you have to remember that the reason you're having to do this is, they don't know, especially if it's, like more in the parental type of thing. They they have the best boundaries they know how to have, which is not what we're learning now. And so they don't understand. So they want it to be like it was, and they don't understand that that's not healthy for you. But you can't have an unhealthy relationship with them and have healthy relationships with others. So you end up having, if you want to have the beautiful, extraordinary life that you deserve, having to set boundaries and make yourself a priority. But you do it as lovingly as possible, which means, you start to work on loving them right where they are and knowing you can't change them, and still being clear that you have to set this boundary. Um, and so a lot of times over time, they want you in their life, but they won't reason into your boundary. You have to set your boundary and keep it. And I used this example last week, but I'm happy to use it again because, repetition helps us kind of get it. And then I'm open to other, questions to go along with that. But like, I had a relationship with someone close to me, that was, challenging, and they were doing the best they could, right? They had a tendency to want to talk negatively about other family members, criticize me on the conversations, and in general be in that space. And you'd hang up the phone call and you'd just be exhausted. You just didn't want to talk again anytime soon. Then I learned to say, I love you, gotta go, and hang up the phone when it started going negative, because I tried all the arguments, and I'm not going to change the other person. So they were difficult, painful conversations that ended up being with accusations back at me, those kinds of things. Exactly. When the family, I'm learning that if I start with I love you and then set it does. That's exactly what I learned. And sometimes you couldn't reason out the boundary. So it has to be gotta go, right? Or leave out the door. And I learned that, not only that, one day I went to do that and the person on the other end went, oh, I didn't mean to be negative. And by this time, I'd spent a long time not saying anything about what she was doing. It's just when the conversation went down that path, love you, gotta go, bye. And I also set myself up when I'd go to visit them, I'd stay in a hotel, because if I stayed at the house, those challenges came up and it would be a big scene, and then it would involve other family members. And so if I stayed in a hotel, if negativity started, I could say, I love you, it's time for us to go now, and not have a scene, not drag any other family member in it. Nobody has to be aware of it. The person who was doing the negative thinking started realizing it. But if I stayed at their house, like if I thought 3 hotel visits and, oh, they got it now, and I stayed at the house, nope, same thing happened. So she was the same person always, but she did want me around. So when I set boundaries in a clear way, so sometimes you have to think about it. You have to really think about, and you trial and error. You'll try something and go, well, that didn't work. You leave going, okay, that wasn't how I planned it to go. But be curious, be open, be kind to yourself. Instead of beating up on yourself when it doesn't work, be kind to yourself when it doesn't work, and go and be curious. How can I do this differently? When I started being, and what happens is, the kinder you are to yourself in that situation, the more you're able to love people where they are, because you're letting yourself love you where you are. Because the hardest thing is, we beat ourselves up. We tell ourselves, well, you just can't do anything right. Well, that sucked. And you go off down that same negative path. Well, that's what they're doing. We don't want to do that anymore. We want to love ourselves and be kind to ourselves, and then love them where they are and know they're doing the best that they can. And then there's that piece of it where you say it's your mom or your dad, and you really, really want to have a close relationship. You see other people's have a close relationship with their parent, and you want that. But you're compromising yourself when you try to do that because they don't recognize your boundaries. If you can let go and just let them be who they are, do your best to just love them where they are, set your boundaries where they need to be. God, the universe will send into your life people to have those relationships with that you aren't able to have in that same way with them. But you have to release them from needing them to be a certain way, needing them to be that relationship you want in order to have that come into your life in any beautiful other way that it can. And that's the key. Let people be who they are the same way you need to be who you are. And the reason it's all tangled up is because we're given this message that early on that they are telling us who we're supposed to be and they know better than we do. They can be church members, clergy members, teachers, all all kinds of people in your life besides parents that are all telling you you don't know who you are. I know better who you are than you are when you're young. And so you lose that connection to yourself. And our goal now is to not only re-empower ourselves, because when you clean that up, relationships are so much easier and your life isn't full of drama because others people's drama doesn't become yours. You're outside of it. You can be loving towards them and you can be compassionate, but you don't have to be in the middle of it. Nor, most importantly, the reason you don't have to be in the middle of it is because you don't take any of it personally, because it really has nothing. Even if they think it has to do with you, it doesn't. It's just their perceptions of you or what you said, and you can't control other people's perceptions of you. That's a hi, Ellen, great to see you. You absolutely cannot control other people's. That's why defending doesn't feel good, because I can't change your perception. It comes from all the things in your childhood and your background that makes you take what I'm saying a certain way. Now, I want to own everything that's mine. If I had a day and I was a little short with you, I want to own that, because if I'm the best me that I can be all the time, then I can't worry about what anybody else thinks. I just got to practice being the best me and stay inside of myself and realize that what you think of me is actually none of my business. And just being the best me. And you know what? If there's something there that matters, it'll come out in a way that I can digest it because I'm willing to look in the mirror because I want to be the best me. And that's the key. A lot of times when people that really don't have boundaries, and I mean like bullies, or even, and they don't necessarily mean to be, sometimes from the way they were raised, they've gotten so much trouble all the time for things that they can't look in the mirror. And looking in the mirror and knowing how to grow and say in a kind way, because beating yourself up is not looking in the mirror, that's just beating yourself up. Looking in the mirror is, instead of beating yourself, going, yeah, but a lot of times they're narcissists out of the own pain of their childhood. They weren't born narcissists. Things happened to them that created that mentality. And if you know that, you can have compassion, but you still keep your space. You understand that you have to set your boundaries because they don't have them. So looking in the mirror is more about a kind assessment, like a curious, well, how could I do that better so that I feel better when it's all said and done? And, you know, I know that I can't change their perceptions, their misunderstandings of whatever that may create misperceptions of me. But how can I have a kind conversation? Or how do I, you know, sometimes it's, I love you, gotta go, whether it's on the phone or leaving the house or, because you can't change their perceptions. And then if they really love you and they want to interact with you, they come to understand that it comes from a positive space. Doesn't mean they don't talk negatively behind your back, doesn't mean they don't talk negatively about others to everyone else, but they know that if they start that with you, you're going to say, I love you, gotta go. And so if they want to talk to you and they want to have that relationship, they skip that part of it. They become aware of it more so. What I noticed in the relationship that I had with this person in my family, was, if once they knew that, those mean comments didn't come. So even though it seemed like they came out of nowhere and they didn't have control of them, they knew that I would walk out the door. And when I set myself up not to be in a position to do that, like meeting at a restaurant for holidays rather than having them to my house because it was guaranteed to happen. When I started setting boundaries to keep my because I knew I wanted to have a healthy I wanted to be healthier. I got that far and I couldn't have an unhealthy relationship with them and have healthy relationships with others, and it mattered to me. But when I started doing that, that you could see that they if I wasn't clear about that, if I thought that it was understood and then we could go back to the old ways, I was shown that that wasn't the case. But I could continue to have a relationship with them and therefore have a relationship with the other people in my family that I also wanted to have a relationship, because I wasn't trying to create rifts in the family. I was just trying to figure out how to be healthy myself and have the healthy boundaries to get to live my own, now extraordinary life. It's just about being able to live from the inside out. So, I want to know if you have more questions, if some of these tips helped you, because, gosh, I just want you to have the opportunity. Like Jennifer said, it is difficult to set those boundaries with people that you are close to. Um, and it is a journey. So be kind to yourself as you figure it out and say, how could I do that differently where it would work out better? Because with each individual, there's little different things. You start to see things as your eyes get open and you can see, you know, um, you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll try this. Okay, that worked better. Okay, cool. And so you begin to figure out what will work to give yourself that space to be you and love yourself unconditionally, and then love them unconditionally where they are, because any anger or resentment towards them is is disconnecting you from your energy, from your best space to be. And so that's why we want to let them be in peace. And that's why as we love ourselves unconditionally, we are able to love them more unconditionally and still set our boundaries. So Ellen says sometimes boundaries do mean, and yes, that it does. Sometimes you just have no choice because there's no other way to have a healthy boundary with some people, but you can still do it. And when I was in that space of needing other people, to like me or want me or need me, I have had to be angry to set a boundary, right? Because I didn't feel justified setting a boundary otherwise. When you get to that really healthy space, you don't have to have any anger. You can just say, and don't get me wrong, you can have anger, but then release it, right? Because it only hurts you if it stays inside. So you find ways to say, you know what, they're doing the best they can with the tools they have, and they're just not able to see. Because I went a long time in my life where I couldn't see. So I understand that someone's not there yet, and they're just doing the best they can. And absolutely loving yourself. And Ellen, when you free yourself in that way, you have more love to give to the people around you that do have boundaries, right? Because those people suck an incredible amount of energy and they don't know any different. A lot of times, like, you're doing all you can to plug into your energy source, God, the universe, and stay plugged in as often as you can. They are trying to plug in and suck all the energy out of you because they don't know how to plug into source. That's why, that would be my ex. And that's why that's a relationship that, as much as you wanted to have a healthy relationship and a divorce, it was not possible. And but let him go in peace, and just know that he's doing the best he can, whatever that is. And he, unfortunately, people a lot of times in those situations are suffering, and one terminology for that, they're creating their hell on earth, so to speak. But they don't know how not to. But you can't fix it for them. That's why you have to walk away, because they're killing you, and there's nothing you can do that will change. You have no control of anything outside of yourself. You can't change anybody but you. And so you have to just release them. Even if it's somebody really close to you, you still cannot you can't be their source. You can't fix them, right? And that's the part it took me a long time to see because I thought I was supposed to be. And that's the boundaries that I want other people to understand because, you know, um, you can't be who you're meant to be, and the gifts that you have to give to people around you in the world, you don't even have them to share when you're hooked up with somebody that's sucking that much energy out of you. And it's not their fault. You also didn't realize that. You thought that you were supposed to be that way, when you got into that relationship, and now you've grown past it. Thank goodness, because how sad for the people that never do, right? So, yes, setting boundaries can be challenging, but oh, what a gift. And what a gift you give yourself. And I just want to say, if you're earlier in this journey, it gets so much easier. And you start to attract people around you that have boundaries. Because when you start this process, if you don't have good boundaries, you have a lot of people around you who don't. And so a lot of the relationships are at first challenging. And then you just say a thankful thank you, thank you, thank you to God, the universe, source energy, for the ones you have that have better boundaries, because most of us have some somewhere that are more giving, better relationships. And if you're, it may be friends, and friends can be family. So let friends be family and love all of your friends that love you back in that way. And, love whoever's in your life to love the best way possible. And if somebody in your life needs space from you, that's okay too, right? Love them where they are and let them have that space. Don't take it personally, because they're growing, going through a change. Maybe they have wounds and scars from when you didn't have as good of boundaries, and now you're learning differently, but they got to catch up. And you just got to love them right where they are and let them be, and let God love them and send them love every opportunity He can. And don't need them to be a certain way for you to be okay. Don't need them to love you a certain way or be. That was a powerful lesson for me. And it definitely took a while to really, truly get it. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes. Um, you know, you can love people around you and have familial like relationships with dear friends and people around you, and be the grandmother for neighbors down the street who aren't close to their grandparents, or they don't live close by, and and you don't have grandchildren, or they don't live close, but you can have loving, amazing, precious relationships, whether they're with your family you were born into or family that you created. And you will end up with better relationships with everybody around you when you are able to release needing certain people to be a certain way for you to be okay, and let yourself and them be whoever they are and you are in the most beautiful ways possible. Eleni says, such a great point about attracting others who have and respect boundaries themselves. Yeah, I think one of the things we do that makes it so much more painful is we're afraid to release the relationships. Like, we'll never be loved like that. Like, if we can't find a way to have the relationship we want with this person who doesn't have boundaries, then, and so we try to make them be who we need them to be, right? God, that's painful. It's so painful and exhausting. And when we're able to step back, let them be who we are, but be who we need to be and set those boundaries. And then we don't understand that because we've never been able to have that happen. That's why it's so hard at first. But once you start to do that and you give yourself permission to be you and just soak in the love from anybody around you who appreciates you, I don't care if it's a coworker, a boss, an employee, a friend, a neighbor. Love those people. Take them gifts, write them cards, write thank you notes, write in your journal how much you appreciate them and how much you appreciate yourself for each thing that you do, and watch your relationships around you expand and grow, and watch yourself have beautiful familial relationships, whether it's with your born family or family you've made with friends, and watch everything expand, and watch your relationships, even with people that you have to set careful boundaries with, expand. And those few that you have to release, you let them go and watch tenfold come in that are better, amazing, incredible relationships. I promise you, it's worth the journey, and it's worth setting those difficult boundaries, and it's worth continuing to figure it out when it seems hard. And you're going to have those you're going to have those conversations that turn into arguments that when you hang up the phone, you're like, whoa, that did not work out. That was not good. Give yourself some space. Go take a walk, put on your favorite playlist. If you have somebody that you know is upbeat, that you don't want to talk, you do not, let me say this. When you have that, do not pick up the phone and call somebody else and tell the whole conversation to somebody else and gripe about it, because that puts more negativity in that space and takes you further down the path of not solving it. When you end up in a space where you don't feel good in a conversation, gently be gentle with yourself and look for ways to feel better. Don't even figure out how you can do it differently until you get yourself in a better feeling space, because you can't find solutions when you're in the middle of the problem, right? When you're hurting or it's been difficult, that's not the time to look for solutions. Now, get your toolbox out. Anything that makes you feel better, do those things that make you feel better until you get to the best feeling place you can at that moment in time, and then get to the next best feeling you can, and then come back to that when you're feeling better. And then may take several tries. Well, okay, now when I'm in a place where I can be reasonable, dissect out what didn't work, took it down the wrong path, and then think about how you could handle that differently, what different tool you could use. So that is the goal, and we definitely will come back with a new conversation next week. Actually, next week we're going to talk about bullies and boundaries, and so I can't wait to see you next week. I hope that you got some great tips. Oh, you're right. You could actually, Victoria, if you could pop the link for the reframe game in there for them. That's a free game to help you start changing the way you think when you have those negative thoughts, because you can use it in a million different ways. And yes, you can use it to help you with these challenging conversations to set boundaries. Oh my gosh, Jennifer, you're so, so welcome. I just appreciate you coming, and I wish you guys an amazing, amazing week. And I cannot wait to see you next week. And it'll be 2:00 Central Standard Time again next week. And we're going to talk about boundaries and bullies. So you guys have an amazing week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You know where to find me on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. I have YouTube channel and TikTok. You're welcome to find me in all the ways. And I love you guys. I love you guys, and I believe in you. And let's go have an absolutely extraordinary day. See you next week.